Ezekiel Johnson was not just any man. He was a self-made millionaire, someone who had climbed his way up from the tough streets of Chicago to become one of the most successful businessmen in America. His name carried weight, and his presence commanded respect, or at least that's what he thought until the day everything changed. It was a warm afternoon in Miami, and Ezekiel had decided to take a break from his busy schedule. He booked a stay at the Ocean View Grand Resort, one of the most luxurious hotels on the East Coast. With its sparkling pools, private beaches, and five-star service, it seemed like the perfect place for him to relax. Dressed in a sharp navy blue suit with polished leather shoes, Ezekiel walked into the grand lobby of the hotel. The air smelled faintly of expensive cologne and fresh flowers. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting soft golden light over the marble floors. Guests lounged on plush sofas, sipping champagne while soft piano music played in the background. Ezekiel felt confident as he approached the front desk. This was his world now, or so he believed. The receptionist behind the counter looked up but didn't smile. She glanced at Ezekiel briefly before returning her attention to the computer screen in front of her. "Can I help you?" she asked in a tone that was polite yet distant. "Yes," Ezekiel replied smoothly. "I have a reservation under my name. Ezekiel Johnson." The receptionist typed something into the system and then paused. Her eyes flickered back to Ezekiel, this time with a hint of skepticism. "Are you sure it's under your name?" she asked. "Sometimes people book under different names." Ezekiel frowned. "No, it's definitely under Ezekiel Johnson," he said firmly. After a few more seconds of typing, the receptionist nodded. "Ah, yes. Here it is. A standard room for 3 nights. Before Ezekiel could respond, another guest stepped up to the counter, a tall white man in an equally expensive suit. Without missing a beat, the receptionist turned her attention to him, her demeanor shifting instantly. "Good afternoon, sir," she greeted warmly. "Welcome to the Ocean View Grand Resort. Do you have a reservation?" The man smiled casually. "Yes, under Richard Thompson." The receptionist checked the system and then beamed. "Of course, Mr. Thompson. We've upgraded you to one of our oceanfront suites. Would you like me to arrange for a complimentary bottle of champagne to be sent to your room?" Ezekiel stood there watching the exchange unfold. His jaw tightened as he realized what was happening. While he was given the bare minimum, a standard room without even a second glance, this stranger was being treated like royalty. It wasn't subtle. It was blatant. And it stung. Trying to keep his composure, Ezekiel leaned closer to the counter. "Excuse me," he said, addressing the receptionist. "Why wasn't I offered an upgrade, or at least shown the same level of courtesy?" "The receptionist blinked, caught off guard. Then, almost imperceptibly, her lips curled into a smirk. "Sir, upgrades are based on availability and loyalty program status," she explained dismissively. "But I'm a first-time guest," Ezekiel pressed. "Shouldn't I receive the same welcome as anyone else?" By now, a small crowd had gathered nearby, listening to the conversation. Some guests exchanged knowing glances while others whispered among themselves. Ezekiel could feel their judgmental stares burning into him. "I'm sorry if there's been a misunderstanding," the receptionist said, though her tone suggested otherwise. "If you'd like, I can look into upgrading your room, but I can't guarantee anything." "That won't be necessary," Ezekiel snapped, his patience wearing thin. "I'll take my business elsewhere." As he turned to leave, the receptionist called after him. "Sir, please don't make a scene. If you need assistance, we're happy to help." It was too late. Ezekiel was already halfway out the door, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. Outside, the sun blazed down on him, but he barely noticed. All he could think about was how he'd been treated, not as a valued customer, but as someone unworthy of respect. That night, back in his apartment in Chicago, Ezekiel replayed the events in his mind over and over again. He couldn't shake the feeling of humiliation. It wasn't just about the hotel staff doubting his identity or denying him an upgrade. It was deeper than that. It was the assumption that because of the color of his skin, he didn't belong in their elite space. For hours, Ezekiel sat by the window, staring out at the city skyline. His thoughts raced as he tried to process what had happened. At first, all he wanted was to forget about it, to move on and focus on his work. But the more he thought about it, the angrier he became. How many other people had faced similar treatment? How many others had been made to feel small simply because of who they were? Then, slowly, an idea began to form in his mind. What if this wasn't just about him? What if it was about sending a message that no one should ever feel less than because of their race, wealth, or background? By morning, Ezekiel had made up his mind. He wouldn't let this incident slide. Instead, he would use it as fuel to create change, not just for himself, but for everyone who had ever been treated unfairly. And so, with determination burning in his heart, Ezekiel set out on a journey that would transform not only his life, but also the lives of countless others. Little did the Ocean View Grand Resort know, they had awakened a force far greater than they could imagine. Ezekiel Johnson wasn't the kind of man to let anger consume him. He knew that revenge wasn't about lashing out in the heat of the moment. It was about strategy. Over the next few days, he channeled his frustration into action. Sitting in Ibam, his high-rise office overlooking downtown Chicago, Ezekiel began researching everything he could about the Ocean View Grand Resort. He wanted to understand its weaknesses, its vulnerabilities, and most importantly, how it fit into the larger puzzle of Miami's hospitality industry. What he discovered shocked him. The Ocean View Grand Resort wasn't just a standalone hotel. It was part of a massive chain owned by Charles Whitmore, a billionaire known for his old money arrogance. Whitmore's empire stretched across multiple states, with properties catering exclusively to the wealthy elite. But beneath the glossy exterior lay cracks Ezekiel intended to exploit. The resort relied heavily on its reputation as an exclusive getaway. Its success depended on attracting affluent guests who craved privacy and luxury. However, Ezekiel realized that this exclusivity also made it fragile. If he could disrupt the flow of business to the resort, he could weaken its foundation. And Ezekiel had the resources to do exactly that. Over the following weeks, Ezekiel quietly began acquiring properties surrounding the Ocean View Grand Resort. At first, no one noticed. Small businesses, vacant lots, and even struggling apartment complexes were purchased under various shell companies. By the time anyone caught wind of what was happening, Ezekiel already controlled nearly half the real estate in the area. His plan was simple: transform the neighborhood economically while cutting off the resort's lifeline. But Ezekiel didn't stop there. He poured millions into renovating these properties, turning them into vibrant hubs of activity. One former warehouse became a state-of-the-art community center, offering free workshops, classes, and events for locals. Another property was converted into affordable housing units, providing safe and modern living spaces for families who had been priced out of the area. Ezekiel also invested in local entrepreneurs, funding startups and small businesses that brought jobs and opportunities to the community. Word spread quickly about the changes happening in Miami. People marveled at the transformation, wondering who was behind it all. Some speculated it was a government initiative, while others thought it might be a tech billionaire looking to give back. No one suspected it was Ezekiel, not yet. Meanwhile, whispers of discontent began to ripple through the Ocean View Grand Resort. Staff members noticed fewer bookings than usual, especially among their regular clientele. Guests complained about increased noise from nearby construction sites and the growing crowds flocking to Ezekiel's new ventures. The resort's once pristine beaches now felt less exclusive, as locals took advantage of public access points created by Ezekiel's developments. Charles Whitmore, the owner of the resort chain, grew increasingly agitated. For decades, he had operated his business without competition, assuming his wealth and influence would shield him from challenges. But now, something, or someone, was threatening his empire. Determined to find answers, Whitmore sent private investigators to uncover the source of the disruption. It didn't take long for them to piece together the truth. Reports came back detailing Ezekiel's acquisitions and investments. Whitmore scoffed when he heard the name Ezekiel Johnson. Surely this couldn't be the same man who had stormed out of his resort months ago. Yet as more evidence emerged, Whitmore realized that Ezekiel was not only responsible, he was playing a long game. Furious, Whitmore called an emergency meeting with his board of directors. In a lavish conference room overlooking Manhattan, he ranted about the situation. "This is unacceptable," he bellowed, slamming his fist on the table. "We can't let some upstart millionaire ruin our reputation. Do whatever it takes to stop him." His team scrambled to come up with solutions. They launched smear campaigns against Ezekiel, accusing him of exploiting loopholes and engaging in unethical practices. They filed lawsuits claiming his construction projects violated zoning laws. They even tried bribing city officials to halt his developments. But every attempt failed. Ezekiel had anticipated their moves and prepared countermeasures for each one. As the battle intensified, Ezekiel remained calm and focused. He knew that Whitmore's desperation was a sign of weakness. The billionaire's reliance on dirty tactics only highlighted the flaws in his character and the fragility of his empire. Ezekiel's approach, on the other hand, was rooted in transparency and community support. Every step he took was designed to empower others, earning him loyalty and admiration along the way. By the end of the year, the impact of Ezekiel's efforts was undeniable. The Ocean View Grand Resort's profits plummeted as guests opted for alternatives that offered better value and inclusivity. Local businesses thrived thanks to Ezekiel's investments, creating a ripple effect that benefited the entire region. Even tourists began choosing Ezekiel's properties over Whitmore's, drawn by the promise of authentic experiences rather than artificial exclusivity. One evening, as Ezekiel stood on the balcony of his penthouse apartment, he reflected on how far he'd come. The humiliation he had endured at the resort now seemed like a distant memory. What had started as a personal vendetta had evolved into something much bigger, a mission to challenge systemic inequality and create lasting change. Still, Ezekiel knew the fight wasn't over. Whitmore wouldn't go down without a fight, and the billionaire still held significant power. But Ezekiel was ready. He had spent months laying the groundwork for his ultimate move, a move that would leave Whitmore powerless and redefine the future of the hospitality industry. With a determined smile, Ezekiel turned back inside, picked up his phone, and dialed his financial advisor. It was time to execute the final phase of his plan. Ezekiel Johnson returned to Miami 6 months after the humiliating incident at the Ocean View Grand Resort. But this time, he wasn't walking into the lobby as a guest. He arrived as a man who owned half the neighborhood, and his presence sent shockwaves through the city. News of his acquisitions had spread like wildfire, and whispers about the mysterious investor disrupting the status quo reached every corner of Miami. People were curious, intrigued, and in some cases, terrified. The first thing Ezekiel did upon his return was visit the properties he had purchased. He walked through the newly renovated community center, where children laughed and played while adults attended workshops on entrepreneurship and financial literacy. He toured the affordable housing complexes, now filled with families who had once struggled to find decent places to live. He inspected the bustling marina, which had been transformed into a hub for local fishermen, small boat tours, and weekend markets. Everywhere he went, people greeted him with gratitude and respect. But Ezekiel's true target remained the Ocean View Grand Resort. Its once exclusive aura was fading fast, overshadowed by the vibrant energy of the surrounding area. Guests who used to rave about the resort's tranquility now complained about the noise from nearby construction and the influx of tourists flocking to Ezekiel's attractions. Staff members whispered anxiously about declining bookings and shrinking tips. Even the resort's pristine beaches no longer felt private, thanks to Ezekiel's efforts to open them up to the public. Charles Whitmore, the billionaire owner of the resort chain, watched it all unfold with growing panic. For decades, he had operated under the assumption that his wealth and influence made him untouchable. But Ezekiel's relentless campaign had exposed the cracks in his empire. Whitmore tried everything to stop him, filing lawsuits, launching smear campaigns, and even attempting to bribe local officials. But nothing worked. Every move he made only highlighted his desperation, while Ezekiel's calm and calculated approach earned him widespread admiration. Determined to fight back, Whitmore decided to take matters into his own hands. One afternoon, he personally visited the Ocean View Grand Resort, determined to rally his staff and reassure guests that the hotel remained the pinnacle of luxury. Dressed in an expensive suit and flanked by bodyguards, Whitmore strode through the lobby like a king surveying his kingdom. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced to a group of employees gathered in the conference room, "we will not let some outsider destroy what we've built here. The Ocean View Grand Resort is a symbol of excellence, and we must defend it at all costs." His words were met with polite applause, but beneath the surface, morale was crumbling. Many staffers had already begun looking for jobs elsewhere, tired of working for a company that seemed out of touch with reality. Guests, too, were dwindling in number, opting instead for the lively atmosphere of Ezekiel's ventures. Meanwhile, Ezekiel continued his assault on the resort's reputation. He launched a bold marketing campaign promoting inclusivity and accessibility. Billboards featuring smiling families of all races lined the highways leading to Miami. Flyers advertised free events hosted at his community center, live music performances, food festivals, art exhibitions, and workshops designed to bring people together. Social media buzzed with excitement as locals and tourists alike shared stories of their experiences. One of the most impactful initiatives was the creation of a loyalty program for Ezekiel's properties. Guests who stayed at his hotels or rented spaces in his developments earned points redeemable for discounts, free meals, and exclusive access to events. Unlike Whitmore's rigid policies, Ezekiel's program welcomed everyone, regardless of income or background. It was a direct challenge to the elitism that defined the Ocean View Grand Resort, and it worked. As the months passed, the contrast between the two men became impossible to ignore. Whitmore represented exclusion, arrogance, and privilege, while Ezekiel embodied equality, opportunity, and progress. Public opinion shifted dramatically in Ezekiel's favor, leaving Whitmore isolated and desperate. Finally, Ezekiel made his boldest move yet. Through a series of strategic negotiations, he acquired controlling shares in the Ocean View Grand Resort itself. It was a masterstroke, one that caught Whitmore completely off guard. When the news broke, Whitmore stormed into a boardroom meeting, livid and powerless, as Ezekiel calmly outlined his vision for the future of the property. "This isn't about revenge," Ezekiel said, addressing the stunned board members. "It's about creating a space where everyone feels welcome. The Ocean View Grand Resort has incredible potential, but it's been held back by outdated ideas. Together, we can redefine what luxury means, not just for the wealthy few, but for everyone." Whitmore couldn't bear to listen any longer. With a mix of rage and resignation, he stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. His reign was over. With the resort now under his control, Ezekiel wasted no time implementing changes. He began by revamping its hiring practices, ensuring diversity and fairness at every level. Staff training programs emphasized cultural sensitivity, teaching employees how to treat all guests with respect and dignity. Even the interior design was updated to reflect a more welcoming atmosphere, incorporating artwork and decor inspired by various cultures. Perhaps the most significant change was the elimination of discriminatory policies. Gone were the days when certain guests received preferential treatment based on race or wealth. In their place came initiatives aimed at fostering inclusivity. Discounts were offered to low-income families, and partnerships were formed with organizations supporting marginalized communities. The reopening of the Ocean View Grand Resort marked a triumphant moment for Ezekiel. Standing in the same spot where he had been humiliated just a year earlier, he addressed a crowd of reporters, employees, and community members. Behind him stood banners proclaiming the resort's new slogan, "Luxury for All." "This isn't just about me," Ezekiel said, his voice steady and strong. "It's about proving that success doesn't have to come at the expense of others." Together we can create spaces where everyone feels valued, respected, and included. The audience erupted in applause, many moved to tears by Ezekiel's words. Among them were former employees of the resort, who had returned to work under Ezekiel's leadership. They spoke enthusiastically about the positive changes they'd witnessed and expressed hope for the future. For Charles Whitmore, however, there was no redemption. Stripped of his power and influence, he faded into obscurity. Some claimed he moved abroad to escape the shame, while others believed he lived quietly in a modest apartment, haunted by the knowledge that his prejudice had cost him everything. As for Ezekiel, his journey was far from over. The transformation of the Ocean View Grand Resort was just the beginning. He continued expanding his philanthropic efforts, funding scholarships for underprivileged youth and supporting minority entrepreneurs. His story served as a powerful reminder that resilience, coupled with purpose, could turn even the darkest moments into opportunities for greatness. And so, the man who had once been humiliated at a hotel came full circle, owning not just the building but also the narrative. Ezekiel Johnson proved that true power lies not in tearing others down but in lifting them up, and in doing so, he left an indelible mark on the world. Ezekiel Johnson had always been a man of vision, but nothing could have prepared him for the sheer satisfaction he felt as he walked through the newly transformed Ocean View Grand Resort. The once exclusive hotel now buzzed with life, its halls filled with laughter, music, and the sound of people from all walks of life coming together. Gone were the days when it catered only to the wealthy elite. Today it was a place where everyone, regardless of their background, could experience luxury and feel welcome. The transformation wasn't just cosmetic. Ezekiel had worked tirelessly to ensure that every aspect of the resort reflected his values. From the diverse artwork adorning the walls to the inclusive policies implemented across the board, the Ocean View Grand Resort had become a symbol of progress. Staff members, many of whom had returned after Whitmore's departure, spoke proudly of the changes. They described how training programs had taught them to see guests not as customers, but as individuals deserving of respect and care. But Ezekiel knew that owning the resort wasn't enough. He wanted to send a message that no act of cruelty or discrimination would go unanswered. And so, he decided to host a grand reopening event, inviting reporters, community leaders, and even former employees who had left during Whitmore's tenure. It was time to show the world what the Ocean View Grand Resort truly stood for. The evening of the reopening arrived, and the resort sparkled under the Miami moonlight. Strings of fairy lights illuminated the palm trees lining the beach, while soft jazz played in the background. Guests mingled freely, sipping cocktails and marveling at the stunning decor. At the center of it all stood Ezekiel, dressed in a tailored suit, his presence commanding yet warm. As the clock struck 8, Ezekiel stepped onto a small stage set up near the pool. A hush fell over the crowd as he began to speak. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice steady and clear, "tonight is more than just a celebration of this beautiful property. It's a celebration of resilience, unity, and the power of change. Many of you know my story, that I once stood in this very lobby, humiliated because of the color of my skin. But tonight I stand here as proof that no obstacle is insurmountable if we face it with courage and purpose." The audience erupted into applause, some nodding in agreement while others wiped away tears. Ezekiel paused, letting the moment sink in before continuing. "This resort represents more than bricks and mortar. It represents hope for a future where everyone has access to opportunity, where success isn't defined by exclusion, but by inclusion. Together we can create spaces that uplift, inspire, and empower." When Ezekiel finished speaking, the crowd gave him a standing ovation. Reporters rushed forward, eager to capture his words and share them with the world. Social media lit up, with posts praising Ezekiel's journey and the remarkable transformation of the Ocean View Grand Resort. By morning, headlines declared him a hero, a visionary, and a force for good in an industry long dominated by privilege. Meanwhile, Charles Whitmore watched from afar, his pride shattered. Once a towering figure in the hospitality world, he now found himself irrelevant, a relic of a bygone era. His attempts to discredit Ezekiel had backfired spectacularly, turning public opinion firmly against him. Friends and colleagues distanced themselves, unwilling to associate with someone seen as out of touch and unethical. Whitmore tried to salvage what remained of his empire, but it was too late. Investors pulled out, lawsuits piled up, and properties across his chain began losing value. In desperation, he sold off assets to stay afloat, but each sale only highlighted his downfall further. Eventually, he disappeared from the public eye altogether, leaving behind a legacy of greed and prejudice. For Ezekiel, however, life was better than ever. The success of the Ocean View Grand Resort opened doors he hadn't even imagined. Invitations poured in from conferences, universities, and organizations eager to hear him speak about leadership, equality, and social responsibility. He used these platforms to amplify his message, urging others to challenge systems of oppression and build a more equitable world. One of his most impactful initiatives was the launch of the Johnson Foundation, dedicated to supporting minority entrepreneurs and fostering diversity in business. Through grants, mentorship programs, and networking events, the foundation helped countless individuals achieve their dreams. Stories of beneficiaries flooded the media, stories of single mothers starting businesses, young innovators creating groundbreaking products, and entire communities rising out of poverty. Ezekiel also expanded his real estate ventures, acquiring struggling hotels and resorts across the country and transforming them into inclusive destinations. Each property became a testament to his philosophy. Luxury should be accessible, and hospitality should celebrate humanity in all its forms. Despite his growing fame, Ezekiel remained grounded. He often visited the Ocean View Grand Resort, walking its halls and chatting with staff and guests alike. Employees adored him not just for his generosity but for the way he treated them as equals. Guests too raved about their experiences, sharing stories of kindness and connection they had never encountered elsewhere. One particularly memorable moment came when a young boy approached Ezekiel during one of his visits. Clutching a sketch pad, the child shyly asked if he could draw him. Ezekiel smiled warmly and nodded. As the boy sketched, he explained that his family had recently stayed at the resort thanks to a scholarship program funded by the Johnson Foundation. "You changed our lives," the boy's mother said, tears glistening in her eyes. "We've never felt so welcome anywhere before." Ezekiel knelt down to meet the boy's gaze. "Thank you for reminding me why I do what I do," he said softly. Moments like these fueled Ezekiel's determination to keep pushing forward. He understood that his journey wasn't just about personal vindication. It was about creating a ripple effect of positive change. Every policy he implemented, every investment he made, and every speech he delivered contributed to a larger mission: dismantling barriers and building bridges. By the end of the year, Ezekiel's influence extended far beyond Miami. Cities across the United States, and eventually the world, took notice of his work, adopting similar practices in their own industries. Hotels, restaurants, and businesses began prioritizing inclusivity and accessibility, inspired by Ezekiel's example. Even critics who had initially dismissed him as a flash-in-the-pan millionaire now acknowledged his impact. Articles praised his strategic brilliance, while documentaries chronicled his rise from humble beginnings to global prominence. Some called him a modern-day Robin Hood, others hailed him as a pioneer of ethical capitalism. Yet, despite the accolades, Ezekiel stayed true to his roots. He continued mentoring young entrepreneurs, funding scholarships, and advocating for systemic change. His journey served as a reminder that success wasn't measured by wealth or status, but by the lives touched along the way. As he stood on the balcony of the Ocean View Grand Resort one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Ezekiel allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. The road had been long and difficult, but every step had been worth it. What started as an act of revenge had evolved into something far greater, a movement to redefine luxury, hospitality, and humanity itself. And as the waves lapped gently against the shore, Ezekiel knew that his work was far from over. There were still battles to fight, injustices to address, and dreams to fulfill. But for now, he allowed himself to smile, knowing that he had already changed the world in ways he never thought possible. Years had passed since Ezekiel Johnson first set foot in the Ocean View Grand Resort as a humiliated guest. The journey that began with anger and indignation had transformed into something far greater, a legacy of empowerment, equality, and hope. Today, Ezekiel was no longer just a businessman. He was a symbol of resilience and change. His name echoed not only in boardrooms, but also in classrooms, community centers, and homes around the world. The Ocean View Grand Resort remained at the heart of his empire, serving as a shining example of what hospitality could achieve when rooted in inclusivity. Its success inspired other businesses to follow suit, sparking a wave of transformation across industries. Hotels that once turned away guests based on race or income now embraced diversity, offering programs and policies modeled after Ezekiel's vision. Restaurants opened their doors wider, ensuring everyone had access to fine dining experiences. Even airlines began implementing initiatives to make travel more affordable and accessible for underprivileged communities. Ezekiel's influence extended beyond the hospitality sector. Through the Johnson Foundation, he funded countless projects aimed at leveling the playing field for marginalized groups. Scholarships helped young students pursue higher education, while grants supported minority entrepreneurs in launching sustainable businesses. Art galleries showcased works by artists from diverse backgrounds, challenging traditional notions of beauty and creativity. Community centers thrived under his guidance, becoming safe spaces where people could learn, grow, and connect. One of Ezekiel's proudest achievements was the establishment of the Rising Stars program, an initiative designed to mentor aspiring leaders from underserved communities. Participants received personalized coaching, networking opportunities, and financial support to help them achieve their goals. Many alumni of the program went on to become trailblazers in their fields, breaking barriers and inspiring others to do the same. Despite his global reach, Ezekiel never lost sight of the little things, the moments that reminded him why he started this journey in the first place. He often visited the Ocean View Grand Resort, walking its halls and interacting with staff and guests. Employees greeted him warmly, sharing stories of how his leadership had changed their lives. Guests spoke enthusiastically about their experiences, describing the resort as a place where they felt seen, heard, and valued. One particularly touching encounter occurred during a charity gala hosted at the resort. A young woman approached Ezekiel, tears streaming down her face. She introduced herself as Maria, a single mother who had benefited from one of his scholarship programs. "Mr. Johnson," she said, her voice trembling, "I don't know if I'll ever be able to thank you enough. Because of your foundation, I was able to finish college and start my own business. My son and I finally have a stable home, and we owe it all to you." Ezekiel smiled gently, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Maria, you don't need to thank me. Your hard work and determination are what made this possible. All I did was give you the tools, you built the rest." Moments like these reminded Ezekiel of the ripple effect of his actions. Every decision he made, every dollar he invested, and every word he spoke carried weight. Together they created a chain reaction of positive change, touching lives in ways he couldn't have imagined. But Ezekiel's story wasn't just about uplifting others, it was also about holding those in power accountable. Charles Whitmore, the man whose arrogance and prejudice had sparked Ezekiel's crusade, faded further into obscurity with each passing year. Rumors swirled about his whereabouts. Some claimed he lived abroad, trying to rebuild his fortune, while others believed he resided quietly in a modest apartment, haunted by regret. Whatever the truth, one thing was certain. Whitmore's era of exclusivity and elitism was over. In contrast, Ezekiel's star continued to rise. He became a sought-after speaker, traveling the world to share his insights on leadership, equality, and social responsibility. Universities awarded him honorary degrees, recognizing his contributions to society. Documentaries chronicled his journey, highlighting the obstacles he overcame and the lives he transformed. Books were written about his philosophy, inspiring readers to challenge injustice and strive for a better future. Yet despite the accolades, Ezekiel remained humble. He often reflected on the lessons he had learned along the way. That true power lies not in domination but in service, not in tearing others down but in lifting them up. These principles guided every decision he made, ensuring that his legacy would endure long after he was gone. As time went on, Ezekiel began thinking about the next generation. He wanted to ensure that the values he championed would continue to shape the world. To this end, he established the Ezekiel Johnson Institute for Social Innovation, a think tank dedicated to researching and implementing solutions to systemic inequality. Scholars, activists, and policymakers came together under its banner, working collaboratively to address issues ranging from housing discrimination to educational disparities. The institute quickly gained international recognition, attracting funding and partnerships from governments, corporations, and nonprofits alike. Its flagship program, Cities of Tomorrow, focused on revitalizing urban areas through sustainable development and inclusive growth. Pilot projects launched in cities across the globe, demonstrating the potential for progress when communities work together. By the time Ezekiel reached his 60s, he had become a living legend. People spoke of him with reverence, crediting him with reshaping entire industries and redefining what it meant to lead with integrity. Yet Ezekiel himself saw his accomplishments differently. For him, success wasn't measured by wealth or fame, but by the impact he had on others. On his 65th birthday, Ezekiel gathered close friends, family, and colleagues at the Ocean View Grand Resort for a quiet celebration. As fireworks lit up the night sky, he addressed the small crowd gathered around him. "When I first came here years ago, I was angry and hurt," he admitted, his voice filled with emotion. "I wanted revenge, not just for myself, but for everyone who had ever been treated unfairly. But somewhere along the way, I realized that anger alone wouldn't solve anything. What truly mattered was using my pain as fuel to create something meaningful. This resort, this foundation, this movement, it's not about me. It's about proving that no matter where you come from or what challenges you face, you have the power to make a difference. Together, we can build a world where everyone has a seat at the table, where success isn't defined by exclusion but by inclusion." The room erupted in applause, many wiping away tears as Ezekiel concluded his speech. That night, surrounded by loved ones and supporters, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The road ahead would undoubtedly bring new challenges, but Ezekiel knew that the seeds he had planted would continue to grow, nourished by the love and determination of those who shared his vision. In the years that followed, Ezekiel gradually stepped back from day-to-day operations, entrusting the reins of his empire to capable successors. He spent more time mentoring young leaders, writing books, and advocating for causes close to his heart. Though his pace slowed, his passion never wavered. When Ezekiel passed away at the age of 82, the world mourned the loss of a visionary leader. Tributes poured in from every corner of the globe, celebrating his life and legacy. The Ocean View Grand Resort hosted a memorial service attended by thousands, including former employees, beneficiaries of his programs, and admirers from all walks of life. A plaque was unveiled in his honor, inscribed with a quote that captured the essence of his journey. "Success is not about rising above others, it's about lifting others as you rise." And so Ezekiel Johnson's story came full circle. From the humiliation he endured at a hotel to the global movement he created, his life served as a testament to the power of resilience, compassion, and purpose. He proved that even in the darkest moments, there is always light, and that with courage and determination, anyone can turn adversity into opportunity. Though Ezekiel was gone, his legacy lived on. In the laughter of children playing in community centers, in the dreams of entrepreneurs building better futures, and in the hearts of countless individuals who dared to believe in a brighter tomorrow, Ezekiel's spirit endured. For in the end, his greatest achievement wasn't the hotels he owned or the awards he received. It was the lives he touched and the world he helped transform. And that, more than anything, was his true triumph.